Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I will be your host today. My guest today is Dr. Charles Infurna. Charles is both an academic teacher as well as a high-performing coach to athletes in the area of track and field. Dr. Infurna is the coach of one of our previous guests, and you'll hear more about that story in our conversation. And in fact, he's got a book coming out called The Throwing Circle, where he details this coach-athlete relationship, the lessons that he's learned from it, and how meaningful that relationship is in both of their lives, as well as the athlete's ability to perform. I also loved hearing his immigrant story, where his family came to the United States chasing the American dream from Sicily many years ago. And that drive, that same drive that brought his grandparents to the United States, still shows up in the way he represents himself in his day-to-day life. There's some great content, some really good nuggets of wisdom for all of our adventure seekers, including what it takes to achieve and accomplish at a high level, whether we're on a sports field, in the backcountry, or doing something else that's meaningful and pushes us to our own limits. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Dr. Charles Infurna.
So my parents are immigrants to the U.S. I was born here just barely, but they came over my mom came over in 68 and my dad in 76. Or 75 rather. And they were born in Sicily, same hometown. So my grandparents knew each other. My parents kind of knew each other, but not really. My dad, basically, once he had like a third grade education, things weren't as stringent in the late 50s, early 60s in Sicily. And so back then things were a little different, right? You had to file paperwork through the embassy in Rome and New York City and things. And my grandfather, his oldest sister, was living in East Rochester, New York. And so she did the paperwork and she filed it at the embassy. So it took about a year. And my mom, my grandparents, my uncle, they spent like 7 days on a ship from Rome to the Port Authority in New York City.
Wow.
Yeah, so they came because the American dream, right? Like my grandfather at the time I'm his age now. I just turned 43, to escape that socialist situation that they were in, right? Still post World War II, things weren't going too well. They were farmers, so it wasn't the best quality of life. My dad, on the other hand, he came over after he served in the military. So he did a couple of years in the military. Back then in Italy, you had to serve at least 2 years after you turned 18. So my dad served, and then he stayed on for 2 more years, and he had the option of continuing. And he would have been there. It's the rank, it's called Carabinieri. So it's kind of like what your sheriff would be here in the States. And his older brother was living in Canandaigua. He had been married. So because he was married, that expedited the process a little bit. So my dad, they didn't take a boat from Rome to New York. They were on a plane and they came here. And then they met in Thanksgiving of 79 at a family function. And then they were married in October of 80. And I share that because I get emotional talking about that stuff because I look at my life now and think of like what like my struggles are, like what my challenges are. And they literally came with nothing. My mom, they came with 3 suitcases. My parents, she has one. My brother in Arizona has one. And I have one. Still have them. Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
There's like crates that you would imagine, like in the movies, right?
Is basically
what it was, right? So that's all they came with. My grandfather worked at a butcher factory in Rochester. They're like pigs, cows, stuff like that. And then a year after that, he got a job working at Eastman Kodak Company, which was like the big thing in Rochester for so many years. And for the better part of a decade, he would work at Kodak from 11 at night to 7 in the morning, take a bus from Kodak to the butcher factory and stay there until 3 in the afternoon.
Oh my gosh.
Take a bus back home. And that's what he did. I want to share that because I think a lot of what I try and offer my athletes and even my kids, like my parents, they never sat my. I have a younger brother. I'm 43. He's gonna turn 40 next week. They never sat us down and like to talk to us about like work ethic and life, and you have to work hard and you have to do these things. Like we saw it. And my dad worked those crazy hours. My mom worked in an accounting firm. So from like January to April, she was locked down doing that stuff. And really it was my mom's parents took care of us for a while. I remember we lived on the same street for a long time. My after I was born, my grandma basically took care of me until I was school age. So my first language is Italian, and my
Mm.
early childhood experiences were not really good. The nuns didn't appreciate somebody that couldn't speak English, which caused us to move school districts. And like I said, just a lot of that work ethic it came from watching what my parents did. And it didn't really hit me until I went to SUNY Fredonia for college. It was a small D3 school. I thought I was going to be a track star. I went to Fredonia because I thought I was going to be like the next great thrower that they had. When we visited in April of 2000, we went to Dodds Hall, and there's all these throwers in the Hall of Fame. And I wanted my picture up there next to Trevor Hitchcock. He was my throwing coach. He was a national champion in the weight throw like Lewis was, like the stud on campus in the mid 90s. And I was like, I want to be like that guy. Well, that guy was 6'6". He could have played D1 football, but he decided to go to Fredonia because that's where his girlfriend went. And I didn't know all of those things. I'm barely 6'1". I weighed like 185 pounds, and I thought I was going to be this next big track stud. And I was more afraid of not being able to compete than graduating. So we pulled the nose up. I took courses the summer of '03 so I could student teach in the fall. I graduated in '04, and if I wouldn't have done well in those summer courses, there would have been nothing for me. Like New York State was really tight back then with those things, but it was track that really kept me going at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's I think probably all of us look back on our lives, and there are mile markers that in the moment weren't significant that become life altering later on when we try to make sense of it.
right.
And if it was track for you, then I don't think there's any shame in that. That was the thing that kept your nose where it needed to be,
Mhm.
and you got through. So you finished the degree, you have an education license, and what I know about you is you eventually became a track coach. You also got an advanced degree, and I believe so. I'm really interested where even those overlap
Mhm.
and your work with athletes in high performance as well. So take me
Yeah.
through what happened after graduating.
So I graduated in '04. Fredonia had a mechanism in place that if you went to grad school there, you didn't have to take GREs rather. So
Yeah.
like the graduate exams. So I was like, perfect. I don't have to take the tests. Before I finished student teaching, I was already accepted at Fredonia. So I knew I was at least going to continue on with school there. The track coach that I had my senior year, Adarian Barr, the best coach I had, and I only had him for 1 year. He left, and he was my throwing coach, and they didn't have a throwing coach. So I was kind of subbing for BOCES at the time. I had a full-time job in the weight room at the college. So I was able to start paying back my student loan, my apartment, and basically I had enough money for groceries. And it was October of '04. I got a call from the athletic director saying, "Hey, we know you're on campus. Do you want to coach?" And I said, "No, I'm really focused on grad school." And I wasn't being facetious with him or anything. In November of the same year, I was working in the fitness center. Paul Schott, who was the acting head coach, and Greg Prechtel, the athletic director at the time, came down to the weight room and said, "Listen, like you're going to coach. We need somebody to work with these kids." And I said, "Listen, I was their teammate last year. Like, this is not good. Like, I was not a good teammate." So Paul pulled me aside. He said, "Listen, Like, come back for a year. If you don't like it, then you don't have to do it anymore. And I said, okay. And that literally changed the whole trajectory of my life, was that conversation with Paul Shant. I still talk to him. He was our assistant coach. He has since retired from teaching, but if it wasn't for him saying you're doing this, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I don't know where my life would be. I said, okay. The next day I walked into basically coaching my teammates, right? Jen Galvin, she was a senior. We were teammates. Meredith Schichtel, we were teammates. Wally and Alex Hanslick, we were teammates. Bob Larson. I walk in the next day of practice and I said, okay, we have a meet coming up in December. It's my most favorite meet. It was at Kent State University. So from Fredonia to Kent State in Ohio is like 3 hours. But it wasn't just about competing at Kent State. It was about who else competed at Kent State. And at the time, at Ashland University in Ohio, in Columbus, or in Ashland, rather, Judd Logan was coaching Ashland University throwers. Judd was a 4-time Hammer Olympian. He represented the U.S. in 84, 88, 92, and 2000. And made a bid for 04. So he made the qualifier in the summer of 04. I think he tore his bicep tendon or something in the Olympic trials in 04, and he didn't make it. But he was on the cusp of being the first 5-time Olympian for the U.S. and in the hammer, right? Like, nobody had ever done that before. Yeah. And he coached Olympians as a post-collegiate group. So it was more about like, wow, we get to see Judd. We get to see the who's who of fantasy track. But I said, okay, guys, like, what do you want to do? Like, what are your goals? That's the first conversation I had with the kids. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And I had this purple notebook that I used to keep my thoughts in back then. And I had them all write down what they wanted to do. And I thought that was at least a good start for me to try and figure out, okay, like, if Wally and Alex just want to chill on the team and they don't really want to throw far, okay. Jen was great. Jen, up until that point, was like a 10-time conference champion. She was the most decorated thrower the college had up until that point. And I was like, Jen, I think we could go to nationals in the weight throw and the hammer throw. But I think this is what the plan needs to be for us. So the early going, it was really difficult to differentiate between I was your teammate and we would hang out to I'm going to try and take as best care of you as possible. And up until the spring semester that year, it was really tough because we had some pretty, I don't want to say heated conversations, but like Jen thought she should do things one way. I was like, no, I think really we need to be here. Like, we need to go in this direction. So what kind of put us on track was I sent Judd Logan an email and said, hey, I'm coaching at Fredonia. I don't know what I'm doing. Can we come watch you practice in Ashland? And I think today that would have violated every NCAA rule, right? Like, you can't watch other kids practice. I transported the kids in my own car, right? Nobody knew. This was like stealth. So Martin Luther King Day of 05, January 05, Jen, Meredith, and myself, we drive to Ashland University. And we watch. Derek and Joe Woodsky were brothers. Derek was the top-ranked weight thrower that year. And we watched them for 2 hours. And Jen was like, wow, they do the same thing that we do. And I was like, yeah. So the light bulb went off. We immersed ourselves in like this day. And that really helped us get Jen closer to where she wanted to go. Nick Lord came along too. He was a transfer that never really threw, and he wanted to throw. And then Tim Miller, and Nick and Tim, I still keep in touch with. Jen too. Jen's a teacher in Ohio. Nick's a principal in North Carolina. Tim, I'd say, is one of the best throwing coaches in D2. He's down in Texas. But that first go round, I think everything that you don't do is what I did. I was so fixated on wanting them to be great that I wanted them to be better than they wanted to be for themselves. And that's where there was some friction with Nick and Tim and myself, because I thought that they could be better than they could be.
Let me try to synthesize some of this before
Sorry,
we
I
get
got
to the next
rambling
phase.
too much. Yeah.
No, it's very good background for, I think, where we'll eventually hit on with this. But what I'm also picking up in what you're saying, if I I'm a financial planner now, but I grew up playing baseball,
Mhm.
and baseball was all I thought about, all I breathed. I was not as good as I ever thought I was, and but for all of us, no matter what the sport is, it eventually ends,
It
right?
does.
It ended
Yep.
for Tom Brady at some point.
Mhm.
Most of us, it's much, much sooner than that. And when the thing becomes an identity piece, it's even harder to let that transition go. So what you're describing, I think, is good, bad, or ugly. I think we see that a lot in parents of
Mhm.
kids that get into athletics, that subconsciously, not intentionally, but they still are trying to succeed in the dreams that they never
Yes.
accomplish. And it's a
Yep.
very thin edge
Yep.
to, yeah, you want the kid to strive and do their best. You see the ability, you see that they can do better than they're doing, or maybe do better than you're
Mhm.
doing. But the ugly edge, ugly side of that is that it becomes very toxic or abusive or whatever. And so what I heard you describe over those last few minutes is trying to walk through that edge of a guy that had just was finishing the thing that he loved doing. I'm sure you can tell me if I'm off here, but I'm sure there was some identity wrapped in that, who you were as an athlete, and at the same time seeing the ability in these kids to get to a place where they weren't currently. And so this is a podcast about people that push beyond the limits that they thought they were, that each of us have, and what we discover on the other side of that. What I think is interesting is you're standing in the gap there, saying, no, you can do more. Yeah, I see your limits, they're way past what you
Mhm.
think. So maybe spend a couple minutes here talking through what you've learned in that process of how to walk that fine edge to stay away from the toxic and the abuse, but to get to a point where you're in a very healthy, loving way, calling somebody up to a
Mhm.
higher point than what they even believed was possible in themselves.
Yeah. So I think I'm still learning how to do that. I what I saw in Jen and Lewis was they I knew I had limitations as a coach. Like I knew at that point that I didn't know enough to take them to that Olympic level. Like and I would hope that any coach, regardless of what the sport is, like understands their own limitations too. And it was hard for me because I saw was being selfish because I wanted her to be great, but then because I knew I wanted to be able to say, look at what she did.
Mm.
I coached her and then she went to the Olympics, right? Or I coached her and she went to the trials. Like, and and I felt bad because I don't I think that they had more there. But what it taught me is that I could never love the competition, love the grind of the training, the practices, the sitting through these meets more than they do. And I think that's what, even as a dad now, I have four boys. I have an 11-year-old, 9-year-old, 7-year-old, and 3-year-old. And the three older boys played football this past year for our youth association. Joseph's our 11-year-old. He played offensive line. Like he's a big kid, right? Like I think he's inherited some of my genes. Dominic's in ninth grade, and he's 9 years old. He's just reckless. He played fullback and linebacker, and he loved to hit kids.
Jeez.
Santino is 7, and he's more of the finesse, right? He has a combination of both. And with my partner Erin, she's a big part of this later story. We were sitting at one of the games, and Santino played. He's in second grade. He played against first and second graders. He's literally head and shoulders above everybody else, and he scored like 4 touchdowns in one of these games, right? Like, okay. And his parent came up to us and was like, "Wow, like in 5 years, you're gonna have like half the starting varsity team for Hornell football." And it just blew my mind because like I wasn't a great athlete. Erin was, she played varsity basketball. Like she like we competed, but we've both seen what the other end is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've competed in competitions with Olympians. Like I've competed with world-class athletes. Not that my kids are going to be, but I just like other people putting this stigma on mine because they dominated youth football for 1 year. Come on. So I am the most hands off when it comes to those things where parents are screaming, yelling. Like my parents, I could hear them when I played from across the field. My dad would be swearing in Italian. Baseball games got my brother, he had the opportunity to play D1. So
Oh, wow.
he was good. And my parents, my dad may or may not have been asked to leave some varsity games for how his actions. My grandfather too.
Little fire.
They were very fiery, but like I I know that I can't get like that for my college kids, and I can't get like that for my kids because they have to want to do it for themselves. And
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds really cliche, Joshua, but like that's essentially a lot of what I've learned over this like 15 years of coaching is I can never want it more than they do.
Yeah, I mean, those
I
first
just
few years that you described, you're like really pushing and pushing and
I
pushing
was.
and in their space. And
Yep.
what you're describing now is a step back and say, yeah, you can do it or not. It's
Right.
I don't care.
It is. And the more like I conduct like research studies, I have a doctorate degree and I'm wrapping up a third project on coach athlete relationships. And what I found from like these elite level coaches and athletes that I've interviewed is that the relationship, there has to be trust and respect between the two, but a mutual understanding of what the expectations are. And even these high level Olympic coaches that have been to multiple Olympics with multiple athletes, that's where their line is. And I see it. Like there it has to be, you have to come to it as a team. I can't say with my group at Alfred State now that you guys, someone's going to compete at the 32 Olympics. I can't. Like if they want to come to practice and they want to mess around, okay. But I tell them you can mess up and you can slack off, but if it's going to impact somebody else's opportunities, you can't be here. And the conversations back then wouldn't have been like that. I would have got really upset and said, why are you wasting your talent? If you don't want to be here, just leave.
Mm-hmm.
Where at NAS, when it was brand new, I was coaching Brandon, Lewis, and Jess. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this hands-off approach. If you want to be great, that's fine. I will help you get there because I knew what it took from my experiences at Fredonia. And if you don't want to, that's fine too. If you just want to come and travel with the team and you want to play board games at track meets and not support your teammates and do those things, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
do that. But as long as it doesn't impact what somebody else is trying to do. And I think kids can understand that, at least college age kids, 18 to
Mm-hmm.
23, 24, that there are consequences. I hold them accountable, and there's consequences for their actions. Like the NCAA takes care of the grade stuff. I don't even deal with that anymore. I almost got in trouble with that at NAS once with an athlete, and I was like, you know what, forget it. If she fouls out, she fouls out. Like I can't care about that.
What
But
is NAS? Give us the
sure. So Nazareth College, it's
Nazareth College.
Nazareth University now in Rochester. I met with James Goss, who was the coach then, and he's still the coach now. And I said, I coached at Fredonia. I coached some good kids. Like, I just want to volunteer. You don't have a coach. And he said, sure. He said, we have this kid, Brandon, who has experience in the shot put discus. We have Jess, who she's a PT major, a physical therapy major, swimmer, thrower. And then we have Lewis, this kid who's never thrown before, but he wants to join the team. He was discovered in the cafeteria, as the story goes.
Yeah, he tells that whole story in his episode.
Yes. I mean, it really like it's true random events. So I go to the first meeting in October and I meet the kids and I'm like, okay, like this is when we'll practice. We're going to practice early in the morning. And then there's Lewis. And our second practice, Lewis is like, hey, coach, I'm failing the class. I'm going to drop it. And I was like, listen, if you go below 12 credit hours, NCAA is not going to let you compete anymore. And he said, no, I'll be good. I said, you need to have another class set up. Your advisor told you have one. He's like, yep. I said, okay. So he dropped to 11 credit hours. He comes to practice the next day and says, I can't, I didn't get that class. I'm 11 credit hours. I'm under the NCAA minimum. I said, you can't practice. And that was it. That was the conversation. I was like, I'll send you the workouts. I'll send you what we're doing, but you can't practice with your teammates anymore. And honestly, I didn't think I was ever going to see him again. He didn't compete in track in high school. He had no ties to the team whatsoever. So I never thought he'd come back. Lewis, over the holiday break in January, says, I'm coming back. I am at 17 credit hours. There was something about Lewis. And I know everyone who talks about him, it's like, oh yeah, I saw it. Unfortunately, after that meet, I told the coach I needed to step down. We had a child and we didn't know that there was going to be another one on the way at that time. It was hard because there was somebody else coaching Lewis. I never really tried. I didn't want to engage with him because I didn't want to disrupt what he had. But he would send me updates. I'd be sitting in class and, oh, coach, I just threw 60 feet for the first time. I just threw this. And I'm like, oh my God, like he really is going to be great now. I get a call in July of 15 and he's like, hey, I want you to come back. Lewis called. I said, I don't think that's going to work. Well, I don't want anybody else to coach me. So James and I had a conversation about it. I wrote about it in the book. He basically said, it doesn't matter who's going to coach Lewis. He's going to be great. And I said, okay, then you don't need me. Well, he's not going to work with anybody else besides you. So I don't need you, but he does. I said, okay. I don't know if anybody could have coached Lewis, but at that time, I think I was probably the right person for it. We were just able to extract as much as we could from those kids, but they believed it. And I think that's what my job, I see it more as dad, like mentor, like than coach. Like, I think it's our job as coaches. We have to get our kids to believe that they can do what they say that they're going to do.
Do you think that's the real like difference between, I don't know, success or not success? It really just comes down to belief, not.
I do. Okay. I believe together. Right. When we were talking earlier about the adventure and things and like people putting themselves through these challenges. I'm training right now for a half Ironman. I don't look it, right? I weigh 275 pounds, but I know I'm going to finish the race. I entered a race that doesn't have time limits, and I did that on purpose, right? Some bigger races, you have to be out of the water in a certain amount of time. You have to be off your bike in a certain amount of time. But I picked this one because like I am hell bent that I'm going to finish this half Ironman. I don't care if it takes me freaking 9 hours, but I'm going to finish this race. And I believe it wholeheartedly. I competed in a race last year. It was an Olympic distance, much shorter. But I blew my back tire at 5 miles into a 26-mile ride. And I got off, I unclipped. I was like, I didn't have a CO2. Like, I was just not prepared. So what should have took me an hour and a half, it took me like 2 hours and 15 minutes. And the road marshals were like, you could walk off anytime. Like, it's no big deal. I couldn't tell my kids that I quit the race after them watching, like we train I have a garage gym. They come in there with me sometimes. They've watched me in the winter do bike rides, watching TV and like playing in there. I wanted to show them that you could still do what you want to do, even though there's like outside distractions and then there's other things. So I could have easily have walked off the course and nobody else would have known, right? I could have lied to them and said, oh yeah, daddy finished or whatever. But I believed that I was going to walk across the finish line. I mean, I did. Like, I was exhausted trying to ride 20 miles on a flat tire.
Oh, you didn't fix the tire. You just kept going?
I just kept going. Yeah, I didn't have the kit on the back of my frame, so I just kept going. And I think with like the research that I've conducted in these conversations with the athletes and the coaches, they they believe that they can do what they are going to do because they believe that their coaches believe that they can do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
never lie to a kid and say, you know what, you're going to be great, within the back of my mind, knowing if something happens, then it's going to be on me and it's going to blow up the relationship. I'm not going to lie to a kid. Now, I have worked with some post-collegiate throwers, kids that have graduated that want to continue on. And I'm like, listen, like, you have a full-time job, you want to throw for post-collegiately, like, you really need to think about this because you're not close. Do you believe that you can actually do it, or are you just telling yourself that you can do it? And I think those are two different things from like a psychological standpoint. I know all the research, you write your goals down on a piece of paper and you're 80% more likely or 75% more likely, whatever the narrative is, depending on who you look at. But then you have to believe that you're able to do what you put down on that piece of paper.
Yeah.
And even as adults, I think you need somebody like that also. For me, it's Erin, right? Like we came together at this interesting time in our lives. When I talked to her about this stuff, she's like, yeah, you could definitely do it. But I know that she believes it because she has seen like my worst through this like fall from like September, right? And I think with our college kids, and Judd Logan said it perfectly, we need to be light givers for the kids. He said this in an interview he did, or a presentation he gave at Boston in 2012, where he talks about a light giver, like somebody that can illuminate a path brighter for somebody else than they can for themselves. And I think we need to be those light givers for the athletes that we work with. We need to be that shining light that tells them, okay, we're going to put the map together, right? These are the steps that we need to take to get where you want to go. But this is what it's going to take. And we need to get there together. I believe you can do it, but you have to believe you could do it also. And that always stuck with me because I never, like, as adults, like, you have mentors and maybe you have people that like kind of help you along the way, but not like that. Not like where there's somebody that send you a text message of, hey, I believe in you. I know, you're training really hard right now. Like, I know you could do this. Like, I know that they genuinely care. And I think our kids that we work with, they have to know that we genuinely care because that's going to get them to that next space, I think. And research is one thing, right? And you interview 10 or 12 or 15 people, but then when you have 20 throwers, it's different, right? Like when I was going through school, right? Like this is how you work with kids who have or not disabilities, with challenging behaviors in the classroom, and this is this and this is this. And then you student teach and you have 16 fourth graders in front of you and you have no idea what to do. A book is not going to solve that problem for you.
Yep.
Just like working with the kids, if I believe they can do it, they have to believe that they can do it too. And I think they're going to be more successful that way than if the kids just want to be there just because and they don't have anything else that they want to achieve. Okay, I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to keep you healthy. You get to travel every weekend. You get to spend time in a hotel, hang out with your teammates. And if you're good enough, you get to go to these other track meets. And that's fine. And that's okay. The 23-year-old me was not good with that. 43-year-old me is like, okay, like this is where you are at your life right now as a 19-year-old. This is how I'm going to help you best.
Yeah, that seems like a switch from book knowledge or like your knowledge of the ability of the sport to wisdom. Yeah, and the wisdom in coaching. I love the way you just described that, lighting the path for the kids so that they can believe in their own abilities. And all of us have heard all the stories or the research around placebo effect or the belief effect, the studies around medication of if you believe it is doing something versus not is more powerful than the actual medicine itself. And which is fascinating to me. Like this thing between our ears is significantly more powerful than I think any of us really give us credit
Right.
to. And at the same time, they tell us that we're using a fractional percentage of the ability of it,
Right.
which
I know, it's so
again just
crazy.
is crazy. And so to me, you're putting like this supercharged fuel in the gas tank for these kids to be able to believe that they can do certain things. And I love the way you put it too, that you're not going to lie to them. You're not going to put them in dangerous position. You're not going to create the situation where they fail miserably, because that'll have ripple effects for the rest of their lives. But to call them one notch higher, all of us want that. I've had good coaches and bad coaches. You've had good coaches and bad coaches. The good ones stand out. And I love what you described a minute ago too, because in my life too, I completely resonate. Having a supportive spouse saying, no, you can totally do that, when all the internal voices are saying otherwise, it's supercharged fuel in the gas tank. And it has been life-changing for me as well. I want to get to one or two final things real quick around your research. Is there
Sure.
a specific focus that you found yourself targeting in the research? And then maybe tell us a little bit about your book and when you expect that to
Sure.
come out, and where people would be able to find it.
Yeah. When I was in my doc program, everything was set up for you. So you had your dissertation chair and your committee member were picked for you based on the topic that you wanted to choose. So it was December of 14. I was sitting in my office at Head Start, and I got a call from Dr. Montez, who was my mentor at the time. And he said, okay, we're picking your team. Do you want to do the education route, or do you want to do the coaching route? I was working in early childhood education. That's all I knew. And I said, I'll stick with early childhood education. Later on, I found out in the program that once you defend your dissertation, you're a doctor, you can do whatever you want. Like, you don't have to stay in that field. But it wasn't until at nationals at 16 in Grinnell, Iowa with Lewis that I was like, there's something wrong here. Like, there's some coaches that are really laid back. Some coaches are this, some coaches are that. And then you could tell the body language of the kids. And I was like, these kids aren't going to throw well tomorrow because they're too wound up. Like, they shouldn't be acting like this. I didn't think. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna start researching like these relationships. Like, why do some work? Why don't some work? And I graduated in 16. I wrote a couple papers, early childhood ed, but then I finally got some money from a research foundation in Rochester, New York, to look at these coach-athlete relationships. And the first project was during COVID. I interviewed 6 Olympic throwing coaches that had the purpose of the study was not just a one-off, but you coached an athlete in the 88 Olympics, 92, 96, 2000. Like, there had to be a history there. And it was really fascinating because they really just talked about working with the kids on the same level and getting them to believe that they could get where they can get. And all the kids that they coached, they weren't great high school throwers that ended up going to the Olympics for them. They were decent high school throwers that were brought into a system. They had a support system with other like-minded individuals, and they were the ones that were able to, the cream rises to the top, right? Like, they were able to take their abilities to another level. But these coaches were able to do it every 4 years, which I thought was really fascinating. And they said after a while, you can't just bank on being that the kids are going to assume that they're going to be great because they come here. Because one of the coaches was in a nice part of the country. I was like, you never have to worry about snow, rain, like anything. I was like, you could pretty much get whoever you want. He's like, no, it doesn't work like that anymore. He's like, the kids need to believe that you are going to be the person, not just because you had success with somebody else. And I thought that was really interesting because in a study that I just wrapped up right now with not as elite coaches, it's more about the community and the family, and the kids believing that they're loved and that they're cared for, and that's what allows the relationship to develop. And then the technical stuff, I mean, anybody like Joshua, I could teach you how to throw the weight and the hammer in 2 hours, right? Like, that's not the hard part. It's okay, we're going to get to a competition. It's okay, what is the goal for this meet? What's your expectation? How do you want me to coach you? Like, how do you want me to handle you in those situations? And and the study I'm getting ready to hopefully in the next week or two start submitting it around. It's really what the coaches shared is that they bring the kids together. They want them to feel like they're part of a group, that they're cared for, that there's a support system in place that's going to help them get where they want to go. And the Division I versus Division III coaches, there's different levels of that, which I found really interesting. That Division I and the full-time Division II coaches, they talked about we have Thanksgiving gatherings. The athletes come over before the holiday. Where the Division III coaches, nobody shared that. Like I was a volunteer D3 coach for a while. I don't know if my wife would have liked to have 18 college kids over at the time, but these coaches, they differentiated themselves from that, and they've had the success along the way that they have these great kids that they're able to coach to this level. Excuse me. So that's where it comes down to how we're able to engage, what those interpersonal relationships are, and getting the kids to believe that they can do it. And at D3, I just was at D3 Nationals. It was held at Nazareth University now in Rochester.
Oh, wow.
And the same coaches that were there when I was there with Lewis were still there. It's the same people working with different throwers. And it just astonishes me because it's not that they have more kids to choose from in Wisconsin or Massachusetts. So I think that's where the better coaches start to differentiate themselves from everybody else.
Interesting.
Getting the kids to believe that they can do it, but in a support system where there's other people around them that have the same ideology. That's why I think Ashland Elite worked when Judd was, God rest his soul, when he was alive. He took athletes from all over the place and got them to believe that they could be great. And I do want to share this one quick. A.G. Kruger, he was an 04, 08, 12 Olympian. He's the head coach now at Ashland. He has replaced Judd, passed away. AG took over. AG in 2002 was a Division II national champion. He threw the hammer like 65 meters, okay, which is good for Division II, but he wasn't like going to make the Olympics at that distance. As that story goes, he had a conversation with Judd. Can I train with you? Judd said, sure. So on a handshake, AG leaves North Dakota, drives to Ashland, Ohio, and in 2 years is put on the Olympic team, right? Like AG was good, but not that at that level yet, right? Judd got him to believe that he could do it. Like 14 meters in 2 years is freaking ridiculous. And AG is one of the only American male throwers to throw the hammer 80 meters and the weight 80 feet, like just like superhuman feats. But I don't know if there was somebody else that could have got him there, right? Judd, at that point, he had coached great college athletes, but he had this ability about him, these piercing blue eyes that he would get you could run through a wall for him. And you believed it because of just his presence that he had. And then it just goes on. He coached 50 Division II national champions, like 400 All-Americans, just these silly like Madden numbers, right? If you're playing like video games, like it's just not fair. But he got kids to believe that they could do that. I think coaches could be taught certain interpersonal relationship skills, but essentially it's going to be how they're able to engage with their kids. The book about Lewis, I talk a lot about that. So essentially it's Lewis and myself, his career at Nazareth College.
Okay.
It from start to finish, basically like little stories along the way, but more about my coaching experiences with him. So when I coached at Naz, I kept a journal, and after every practice, I would just write some notes. And those notes turned into basically his story of how a coach and an athlete came together to realize this dream. But I believed he could do it. He believed he could do it after his sophomore year because he saw where he was. He far exceeded any expectations I had for him. But when we got together in August and I said, listen, like, I think you could be the double champ. It doesn't happen very often. I know you think you could do it. I think you could do it. let's make it happen. But there were a lot of bumps in the road there.
Yeah,
And
mindset.
he
Totally different
basically,
mindset.
right. And that was it. And it was, and I just, and he's just a unique story to me, like somebody who never competed to get where he was. That people can learn technical things, but it's the other stuff, it's the interpersonal stuff at these high level track meets is really what the difference is. Like everyone who goes to the Olympics hits the standard, right? Everybody is great. You're that 0.001%.
Mm-hmm.
But then what is it when you get there? Because essentially inches separate your gold medal from your bronze, or not being on the podium. A lot of the research suggests that it's a relationship. Does the athlete think, do they believe that all the training that they've done is going to get them to the podium? But like these people have somebody in their lives that believe that, and wholeheartedly, that they can accomplish their goals.
I think that's a very consistent thread. I've done almost 50 of these conversations at this point,
Yep.
but the idea of we don't do anything alone.
Right.
And being the committed introvert that I am, I would love to believe that I do, but I get taught otherwise over and over again. And even in these, like, I mean, a lot of the sports you're coaching in, it's an individual athlete sport, right? It's not hey, we're putting the offensive line out there and they're going to play well together or not. This,
Right.
whether it's tennis or throwing or the athlete looks like the individual going out there, but you're making a very clear point now with the data to support it, that these high performing athletes don't become high performing athletes without somebody in their corner, which I think is fascinating. And so translate that into me or every other everyday explorer that's trying to find limits where things are difficult and push beyond them. That is a really helpful insight to me, to think that whatever it is, I got to have somebody else in it with me.
Mhm.
So what do you have a title for the book, and do you have an idea of when it's going to come out?
Yeah, so the book's essentially done. We're just waiting for some little details to come through before it goes to publication. Yeah, it's going to be called The Throwing Circle. There's a nice picture of Lewis on the cover. Life lessons on coaching and leadership from track and field, essentially. And each chapter, there's like mini activities along the way, as far as like how do coaches ascertain what their coaching philosophy is, what do they value in coaching, how are they able to share that message with their athletes, activities about how they can help their athletes with goal setting, with what does it mean to be focused. Like there's some research intertwined with our story. Essentially, it's going to be available, I'm going to say summer. I think things should be kind of wrapped up here, so summer of 25. It'll be available on Amazon. It'll be available at Barnes and Noble and Target and Costco. So whenever I go, my boys love Barnes and Noble. That's our thing. They always ask, Daddy, when's the book going to be done? When's it going to be done? And I show them other authors that have worked with this publishing company. And I'm like, it's going to be on this shelf. And it's just another thing to show the boys that you set your mind to something, like through hell or high water, Josh, this book was going to get done. Like it's 2 years. So it took 2 years to get through. But yeah, so hopefully by 25, by the summer of 25. So maybe when this episode comes out, they'll coincide with some releases, and I'd love to send you and whoever your team is a couple of copies if I could.
That'd
do
be
that
great.
when it's done.
I'd love to read it. And if the timing works out with the interviews I got in the pipeline, I would love for that to overlap, and we'll put a link in the show notes to get people pointed to you. Are you on any of the social media platforms where people can find you and maybe track with you when it does come out?
Yeah, so Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn at Charles Infurna, just my first and last name under lowercase letters. I've been talking about it. I try and post regularly as far as like research,
cool,
tidbits and things, and how to engage with your athletes. So
well, I'll definitely highlight those and point people in that direction. And Charles, you've been, I would put it this way, you've been very generous with your time, not only in the amount, but with your honesty and emotion through your life journey. And that's all I hope for in these conversations, is that we have just an open, honest conversation about what you've learned through living this thing we call life. And you've done a very good job, in my opinion, of highlighting the things that you've learned that matter, and what doesn't matter, that wisdom transition that we talked about. And like any of these other conversations, what is it why do people push themselves, and what do we get and learn from it on the other side? I think you've added to the knowledge base that is swirling around this podcast. So I'm very thankful for it.
Thanks. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the On Adventure podcast. Be on the lookout for another episode dropping in a couple weeks. And be sure to go to our YouTube page and subscribe and follow us there, as well as on all the socials from Facebook to Instagram and LinkedIn. Until our next episode, I hope you stay safe and stay on adventure.